I think of marriage as like prison on purpose. Right? When I think of when somebody says, well, what advice would you give to someone getting married? I think, well, who would you want to share a prison cell with for the rest of your life?
You're killing me with it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to be too harsh about
I love it.
But it's true. It's like any relationship you're in is going to have its problems.
Yeah.
So what problems are you willing to have forever?
Right. So let's get right to the punchline. Marriage sucks. And I should know. I've been married for almost 25 years.
And so today, we're going to do our best to see beyond and maybe even step beyond the wrong conversation on the complicated and consequential subject of marriage.
So I'm Adrian Fiorucci. Welcome to The Wrong Conversation. Joining me as my constant companion in these types of conversations is David Peters. We share many things in common, one of which is being married and being fathers and being fellow creatives and even life coaches.
It's true, and today we're going to talk about marriage and the proverbial suckness of marriage.
Right.
And to honor this subject of marriage, I honored one of the great traditions of marriage, and I asked my wife what shirt I should wear. And she picked out a pink button down for me.
Right.
Just as, in her words, to bring the point home. So.
And there you have it. That's great. Perfect.
So I don't know. I'm sure that nobody really watching this knows this, but Adrian officiated my wedding. And he said many beautiful things at my wedding. He did a wonderful job, and we were thrilled to have him officiate. But then, as I've been married, I've always been wondering that if he was actually going to be really honest, instead of saying all those beautiful things at the wedding, if he was going to just kind of bottom line it for me and tell me what to expect, I was wondering what he would say if he had a do-over, an honest do-over. So, Adrian,
honest do-over.
If you were standing up there officiating...
Right. Marriage sucks, but you can't lead with that, You just can't lead with that. Nobody would do it. It's like... No, that's a great segue here. It was an honor to do your wedding, and I think you chose me. Because I think if I remember correctly, you asked me to do this because you were like, I couldn't think of anybody I know that actually honors marriage as much as you like appreciates it as much as you do, and I do, but that's not because it doesn't suck. I mean, it's because it offers a great deal, I think. And I think part of what I would say, if you could be honest in those situations, would be that prepare yourself. There's going to be moments. And who knows? I don't even remember what I said, but maybe I did say something like that. But there's going to be moments, and they're going to suck. And that's because they're supposed to. They're supposed to, and it's supposed to in that way. And I think that's because nothing, and we talked about this, you mentioned this in the last time when we talked about, we were going to talk about this, that it happens with all relationships. Any deep, authentic, real relationship has its moments where it's going to suck. And that's because it's supposed to. It's bringing you, this is how I look at it, it's bringing you to the edge of yourself. It's taking you to that place where you couldn't do it anymore. Like this is showing you where your limits are. And that is not always enjoyable and pleasant, but it's important. And I think it's and marriage does this better than any relationship that I know. Probably because you're so deeply entwined, right? I mean, your whole life, your whole everything. The next one would probably be your kids, right?
Well, it shows you where your limits are, but it also pushes you past your limits.
That's the point. Exactly.
Right? Because marriage does come with a little bit of giving up yourself or your individuality, but not just to give it up, but to give it up so that you can become more than just your individuality.
That's it.
Or more than just yourself. And that does require quite a transformation.
Right.
And that
That's
transformation.
the sucking part.
That's the sucking part. And one of the things you said, the most memorable thing I remember you saying at the wedding was that, and I forget exactly how you said it, but you said something along the lines of that marriage was one of the best circumstances to advocate for your personal growth or something like that. Like you were just talking about how
exactly.
marriage is the structure through which you can move forward the most or grow the most as a human being. And, as coaches, we talk a lot about growth and personal growth,
exactly. Right.
but growth sucks. Like it doesn't,
The
packaging
real
of growth sounds really good, but the reality of growth is that it puts you through a sort of grinder, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It has to tear the muscle down to build it up, like working out sort of thing, right? I mean, it just,
Yes.
yeah. No, it's true. That's exactly, that's, in my life coaching, like I consider myself a spiritual relational life coach. And that's because of that. And in my mind too, again, it's all relationships, and I don't want to get too broad too quick here, but it's just that I do see it that way. Like it's all interconnected in order to see yourself deeper, you need to see yourself in the other. And in order to do that, you have to step out of the way a bit. And they help you do that. Like they push you right to the limit, your wife especially, or your husband, or, your partner, period. You know what I mean? And that pushes you right to that limit of where you just couldn't see anymore and you don't want to, in a way. Right?
Well, you're forced to see yourself through their eyes.
Yeah.
We all carry around an idea of ourselves.
Right.
I don't know who said it or where it comes from, but they say there's 3 yous. There's your version of you, there's someone else's version of you, and then there's the truth. Mm-hmm. I don't know where that comes from, but it's a great thing. But when you partner with somebody that intimately and you spend that much time with them, you're going to see yourself in a way that you have never seen yourself before.
Yeah. And you're going to be forced to.
You're going to be forced to.
Yeah. That's the point, I think, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is I think of marriage as like prison on purpose. Right?
Man, we're really just trying.
Well, people talk about marriage as like people say that marriage is like a box you put something into. You put things into. Like it's a box you use to collect things in your life, right?
Yeah.
But I think, okay, so you're putting yourself in a box with somebody. And you're closing the box in a way.
Yeah.
And so it is like a prison, but it's a prison on purpose.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you do it for good reasons, but it is like a prison. And so when I think of when somebody says, well, what advice would you give to someone getting married? I think, well, who would you want to share a prison cell with for the rest of your life?
You're killing me with it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to be too harsh
No,
about
I love it.
But it's true. It's like any relationship you're in is going to have its problems.
Yeah.
So what problems are you willing to have forever?
Right. This brings up an interesting thing. I remember when we first talked about like maybe this topic, I think I brought it up and I was saying that it wasn't going to be fun. That was kind of what I was trying to point at, right? And I think you said, well, I think most people know it's not going to be fun. I mean, there's lots of work that comes with marriage, and I think that's true. I'm not always sure that we give enough credit or that we think clearly enough about the fact that if we're going to do this, we are actually signing a contract, so to speak, for growth. If we want a good marriage, that's the thing, right? And part of what I was going to get at here with this too is the fact that if you ever notice, and this is a cliche too, right? But we're always attracted to our opposite. It's almost always true. And that's because that person is going to do that. They're going to set up those parameters, right? For difficulty. But you love them, but they drive you crazy, but you love, and that whole dynamic is what helps you discover your edge, right? Your limits, and then helps push beyond those things for both of you.
Opposites attract, and that's good for you. That's good for you. But it's not fun.
Accident.
But it's not fun.
No, it's not fun. No.
But it's good for you because then because a relationship, they talk about two people come together to become one. But if you were both the same, then you really just copy each other.
What's accomplished? Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing accomplished. But if you put two opposites together, then you have... I talk about this a lot in parenting. If I'm talking with people about parenting, like if I'm giving a parenting talk, I say, now you have two... the fact that you're different as parents, because a lot of people fight about how to parent.
Oh, yeah.
And I start by saying, good. Good that you see it differently, and good that you have different impulses, because now you have two specialists instead of two generalists, and therefore you create a bigger whole. And I think that's why opposites attract.
Yeah.
But then you are, like I said, prison on purpose. You're locked up with someone who's kind of your opposite for life.
Yeah.
So you are signing a contract. It's something that you said this to me when, because I was talking to you about something in my marriage, and I was telling you, this thing sucks. It's hard.
Yeah.
And you said, yes, but you married her for a reason.
Right.
And the reason was exactly what you just said, because I wanted to sign a contract for personal growth.
Yeah.
And I trusted that my wife was the perfect person to enter that contract with.
Yeah.
Because she was going to enter it.
You were very conscious of it. That's where you're lucky.
Yes.
Not everybody is so conscious, right? They just feel like they've fallen in love. There's whatever. There could be a million little things that they like the same music and the same movies, and and this is a reason to get married. I mean, some people but I think if we went in with that expectation, we'd come out a lot better, right? 25 years later or something like that. I think that focus, which I think, like I said, I think you were very conscious of. I remember the conversations before you even got married, but I remember that conversation you're talking about,
That was the thing I was most conscious of, because my relationships before had been more about an instant chemistry and fun and experience, just a heightened experience. I was just looking for partnerships that I don't know, were super colorful and big and bombastic, and they all crashed and burned. And or in the periods I was without a relationship, I just knew I was spending half of my free time when I was single was just being spent trying to find a relationship, or trying to meet people, or trying to prepare for a relationship, or trying to cure loneliness. And that took a lot of energy. And then when I was in the relationships I was in that were more about chemistry, then they were failing catastrophically, in the end. I mean, I was with good people. It wasn't that
of course, right.
But it was just that it was built from the air, as I like to say. It was just built from nothing. And so right before I met my wife, I thought to myself, let me try something completely different. And let me think about compatibility over chemistry. Let me follow a different instinct. I didn't want to just choose somebody based on what was on paper. I still wanted some chemistry. I still wanted a belief, but I don't quite know how to say this, but there's different levels of chemistry. We talk about different layers of the conversation, like the right conversation, just because conversations on any topic can come in layers. Well, your intuition has layers too. And I was following a more surface part of my intuition early on.
Sure, right.
I was basing it on just more immediate things, the sugar hits.
Yeah.
Right? There was depth there. I don't want to say it was just the sugar hits. But I just hadn't been humbled enough. I didn't have enough experience to really know. But eventually, I was beat up enough to say, okay, I have to listen to something that's at least a level or two deeper.
Yeah.
So, and those voices are always quieter.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
But they always have better things to say. So if you quiet yourself and listen to the next layer of intuition, what do I really need? What really works for me? Not right now. What's going to work for me in 5 years? What works for my family? What works for my friends? What works for all these things? And then see who comes in front of you and shows up.
Yeah. That's why it's like the deeper question thing that we talked about once, right? The deep questions are like anchors, right? Mm-hmm. So looking for something deeper as you're approaching a relationship, You know what I mean? If you're starting, and that's where my wife and I, we've had some hard times. I think anybody who really knows us knows this is true, whether it's in our finances or our circumstances or with each other. I mean, all of that, right? But for whatever reason, and I guess we wouldn't say whatever reason, I mean, it was something that I always prioritized in my life. My wife was prioritizing in her life when we met, was the depth, was spirituality, to put it in a very general term, right? Like we really, that was incredibly important to both of us. And that's where we really connected. And because of its depth, because of the depth that comes with that sort of focus, it's always helped to anchor us and refocus us whenever we get, does that make any sense? And that sounds like what you were trying to say too. You didn't use that word, but I mean, it's more like you were thinking, I got to think about something deeper here, right? Like, what's going to last? What's going to matter 20 years from now, right? In my life and with this person.
I started thinking in terms of do we serve the same God, is the way I say it in my head.
I remember you saying that, yeah.
Do we serve the same God? And I don't mean God in a directly religious way.
In religion, right.
What are we after? What are our values, is the way that people say it most typically. Right. But everyone's serving something. I mean, that's a whole other topic. But I just believe that we are always acting in service of some idea or some motivation or something. Right. And so what I wanted to do was set myself up to serve another layer deeper than what I was currently serving. Yeah. So I think I chose I guess we chose each other, but my wife stood out to me because we served the same God, or we wanted to serve. For me, I think maybe she was, but I wanted to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I married up, Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. I was, when I was in college, I had a calculus professor that would, I don't know, when he could see people were glazing over about the calculus, he would start to hand out relationship advice. Or he'd ask a question, and if somebody got the right answer, he'd be like, oh, look, Robert over here got the wrong answer. Susan, look at Robert. He got the right answer. Marry up. Marry up. Or no, he said breed up. It was even more crass than that. Breed up. Like if you're going to make kids with Robert because he got the right answer, or vice versa. Susan got the right answer. So Robert got, and he would just, anyway. So yeah, marry up or breed up. But I remember in my wife, I saw things I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right? And I saw things that I had to offer that I knew she wanted to be.
Yeah.
But the opposites attract, right? So
yeah.
So
right. Oh, the same thing for me. I don't think it was as conscious. I think I mentioned this last time too. Things happen quickly in our relationship, so I'm not sure. It was definitely more intuitive. It was very intuitive, our relationship and how we fell in. But it didn't take very long at all before it was very obvious how different we were. You know what I mean? Now, in the beginning, you just kind of glaze over it. Yeah. Right? It's fine. I love her. She's the greatest thing in the world, that doesn't matter. This isn't going to matter. We're going to get through these things. And we did, but wow, they mattered. These differences mattered, and they sucked sometimes. I mean, they really were hard. They're not over. I mean, we're different.
Yeah.
That isn't over.
On purpose. Forever. What problems do you want to have forever?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that, just to get detailed and personal, I mean, hopefully it's interesting and useful. The thing that my wife offered me, and I've talked about this in many of my own videos, is that she was much quieter than I was. And it was such an interesting thing because I just trampled all over her for the first 10 years, David. Right? But then slowly, thanks to her patience, thanks to her endurance, I got to see that, first of all, that's not so great. Second of all, there's something else here. In other words, there's some serious value to the way that my wife is. Where inside of me could that live? Let me look in there. Most beneficial thing I have ever done in my whole entire life. And I learned by example from my wife. That's what I'm trying to share. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy,
Well, that's the opposites attract. I mean, our stories are the same because we're the same. We're both kind of talking machines, right? And then,
right, exactly.
And then my wife was super quiet. And I remember our first two dates were both 6-hour walks. That's a
You
lot
just
of
shared this with
walking.
me when I was, yeah.
And the whole time was pretty much me talking, it was my way of inviting her into a conversation, but I hadn't realized the subtle skill of actually asking questions. I was used to talking with someone like you where I say something, there's a back and forth, it's automatic, but with her it wasn't automatic. But now, even before our talk today, because she won't say much, I'll talk about this subject for 4 or 5 hours. She'll say 4 or 5 things, maybe, over those hours, but they're always profound things that I wouldn't think of. So now I asked her before I talked, I said, will you tell me what sucks about marriage? And instantly she just drops 3 things in my lap that I'm like, oh, what a beautiful point. But before I wouldn't have thought to ask, and now I've learned to ask, right?
Yeah.
I've learned to get quiet and sit and wait. Sit and wait. I think that's kind of what you were talking about.
Oh my
Shut
goodness,
up and sit and wait. Yeah.
Yes. You said it's quieter too, right? Like the still quiet voice has the deeper intuitions, the deeper wisdom. Well, our wives they're sort of archetypes of that.
Yeah.
In a way, they really are, and it's how lucky are we once we appreciated it. But this is part of the whole thing. I mean, this is part of the whole thing. I want to interject too that one of the reasons I believe that marriage, out of all relationships, besides maybe another one, but we're not going to get into this, has the highest potential for this sort of output, if you will, right? This sort of growth, this sort of experience, is because of the commitment and the level of commitment and the public commitment. Like that word commitment has a lot to play in why it has such potential for power, I think. Now, we can throw that commitment under the bus quick these days in our society because we can get divorced really pretty easily and nobody judges it much anymore and all that. But even that still, that commitment forces us to stick through the suck just a little bit more, right? That's what I think, and it's worth it. That's my point that I want to say. And commitment really paves the way for that. I think commitment is a really wonderful gift in any relationship,
It's worth it if you can go somewhere with it. This is what's tricky because I've seen people make that commitment. And so, they've signed the contract for personal growth. But if one or the other or both aren't ready for it,
right,
it is just a prison, right? But it is good. I think that you and I love our marriages, even though they suck, because the suck has equaled growth.
Yeah, right.
Not all marriage suck does equal growth. Sometimes you're just trapped. There are ways to do it wrong.
That's true.
And I think that's part of why this subject is really interesting, and part of why it's good for us to talk about it is because I think we have a little bit of credibility on how to at least make the most out of our marriages and use them for growth, and then love our marriages, right? So,
right.
I think that I don't know, sharing whatever we think, just by sharing our experience here and sharing our perspective, because again, like we said last time, it's not about tips and tricks.
No, right.
There's a lot of marriage tricks and tips. I can give you a list of 100 of them, and they're all true, but it's a process that you want. It's an orientation toward truth or toward the marriage itself. I always like to think that, some people say you have to fight for yourself, or that you should just serve your spouse, and I say no, advocate for the marriage itself. And if you can do that, it will advocate for you. Whatever that means. Sometimes advocating for the marriage is advocating for yourself. Sometimes it's letting go of what you need. Sometimes it's, right? But if you think of like you said, the commitment, if you really are signed up to the commitment and you really understand that the suckiness is an opportunity, then it can pull you forward, right? If you advocate for the thing itself, the institution itself, then it will lift you. Like, it will advocate back for you.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. The one thing I would say too is that not all marriages are meant to last, right? Regardless of the commitment. Like, that was what you were pointing out. But it will still be the greatest vehicle for growth that you've ever experienced.
Yes, even if it fails.
That's it.
Even if it
And
fails.
it has to do with that commitment still again. That's the only thing that's really different. That level of commitment.
My dad says something to me, and I kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I had an opinion at first, but he started out as a very unspiritual person, like a atheistic, a kind of devout atheist, and now he's a devoutly religious, right? And he's been through several marriages. But he now has a very successful marriage. So from his point of view, he says you can't have a successful marriage without that spiritual relationship, without placing something above you, without committing yourself to something above your own ego or the simple services of the self.
Yes, because you have to let go of yourself a little bit. By the way, that's how you get in the present moment. To put cliche words to it almost now, mindfulness, right? That's what that is. Stepping outside of yourself for a minute. And this doesn't mean set down all your needs or wants, or it's not what we're talking about here, actually. It's just let go of the story for a moment, be present. That's the only time you're going to really see your partner. I had this, and sometimes it's wonderful. Sometimes they just radiate when that happens. They're radiant, I should say, right, when that happens. And sometimes it's painful. Like I remember one time that happened for me in my relationship, that what I saw was that how horrible I had been in a way, because I took a moment to step out of myself. I saw my wife. I saw the pain she was in. I saw the pain she was in, and that made me reflect, or it was a reflection, if that makes any sense, right? Of the fact that I had been very closed to the fact that I was pushing this subject and it was painful for her, But it was only when I was stepped out of myself and saw her clean. Not in a marriage even, funny enough, not even in a relationship. It was just, here's a woman. She seems to be suffering a little bit. You see what I'm trying to say? Why? Oh, it was very clear,
You just kind of hinted at something I think is really deep, and we might be going way off the rails here, but you said like you didn't even see her like as your wife, just as a woman. That's something that really happens in a relationship. Is you start to have a relationship with the title or the identity of wife, or
habit, as we've been saying a lot.
The habit or your idea of what wife and husband are, or also people tend to relate to people how they affect them. I give something to my wife that she relates to, and that's how she thinks about me. But there's another 90% of me that may just not be involved in that interaction that's still there, and same with her. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in the habit of how we see each other that we forget that there's a person there. You forget to see that it's a complete human being in front of you, and you just get so used to how you see them that you forget that there's so much more than you see.
Yeah, we're bringing it home already again. Like, this is great. No, I mean it in a good way. This is beautiful. This is super important. And by the way, not just the wife, the child, the coworker, the cashier, right?
Like the friend in the flower. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why that's why I love the subject, by the way, relationships and relating and that, because it's all connected like that, and we do that with everything, is all I'm saying. And it is detrimental, even selfishly. It makes things simple, like we talked about last time a little bit, and there's some sort of necessity to that in our lives. We can't constantly be looking fresh, but it is important to take time to do that, Yeah. I think this is what meditation brings for yourself, a little bit. Like, you sit there quietly with yourself and you get to experience yourself a little fresher, like letting go of all these thoughts, all these stories, all this, and you get to find yourself a little bit in a similar way, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's what happens when you get quiet. All those quieter voices start to get heard. You start to hear all kind of things you never heard yourself say before, right?
Right. Some of them are shocking.
Some of them are downright frightening. The more in touch with like this giant, massive void you are, where there's no solid ground anymore, you know?
Yeah. That's what scares
And-
a lot of people, even in meditation, back to that. But yeah.
Even in marriage, because it's going to force you into these moments where you're going to be forced into situations where talking over the person isn't going to work, arguing, defeating the person. Man, you want a bad strategy for marriage? Try to defeat your partner in an argument. try to be married to a defeated person.
Tried that for about 5 years. I won every one. But
Because what is a defeated person? That defeated person doesn't agree with you. They're just too scared to speak up, or they believe it's not worth it to speak up, and they're just resenting you, and that's building, and they're building into a quiet monster.
Yeah.
You know, so either they are defeated and they're not the partner you want anymore, or they're quietly building into a monster, and they're one day the pipes are gonna break, right? The seal is coming off, and all hell's gonna break loose. So it's going to build up, and until you're gonna be forced into those moments of growth, or else the thing's just gonna fall apart if you don't want to grow. But like you said at the very beginning, you're gonna be pushed up to your limits and beyond your limits, and you're gonna reach a moment when the only way through is to just sit and be quiet and let it come at you. The silence, the pain, the fear, whatever it is, the regret, the sorrow,
the misunderstandings, right, exactly.
Everything. It just and just sit in them, you know, and accept them.
Willingly, as we talked about last time.
Yeah, well, willingly is the biggest part, because if you're just, I mean, they're coming no matter what. Right. And your willingness makes all the difference between whether your marriage moves or it dies. Right? Yeah. It's either going to grow or it's going to die. And willingness is that dividing line, I think, between the two.
I think so too. You know, we've talked about that. I think the first episode, but vulnerability. It has to be talked about here as we're talking about this. Absolutely, right? This is what we're avoiding most of the time. Right? We're avoiding that vulnerability, that squishy spot, like you're talking, where you're just there's no ground in a way. That's what vulnerability feels like a lot. Vulnerability is only actually useful, if you want to use that word, or powerful, offers the power that it has, the potential, when we willingly experience vulnerability. You know, like when you experience vulnerability and it just happens, and you tripped or you said the wrong thing and you're embarrassed and you felt really vulnerable and everybody's laughing at you as a silly example or something, and you walk away and you're like, oh God, I wish that never happened, and I didn't, you know, blah, blah. Nothing's going to be gained because it didn't happen willingly. You didn't open yourself to that experience, you know. That's a different experience than a relationship experience, but it's a similar feeling, right? If you're having that experience with your partner or your child or whatever. I know my dad really suffered with or struggled with this because he could never admit he was wrong. That was an inability to be willing to be vulnerable with me, and it harmed our relationship to some degree. You know, I remember because I realized I was never going to do that at some point, right? Like if I was wrong and I saw it with my kids, I would admit it. Well, you can't. That shows you're weak. You know, no. It's important. You know.
Well, there's a big difference between weakness and vulnerability, and people often mistake the two for being the same thing.
That's right.
Weakness doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Right, it just doesn't. But vulnerability does. But it takes a great amount of strength to be vulnerable.
To be willing to be vulnerable.
Willingly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I was on a call once with a friend, and they said, you know, I'm reaching out to you just to talk because you've had some success where I would like some success, and I'm looking for some advice. You know, how did you do it? What are the mechanics? And I was like, I don't know what the mechanics are, and I don't really have any. I don't have a rule book you can follow, but I know that when things don't work, it's because of my orientation. I'm serving the wrong thing, and my posture. Right? I'm walking into it in the wrong way. Maybe too proud, or too sure of myself, or too ignorant, too arrogant, something. So that all I have to say to you is orientation and posture. You know, and the orientation is
you're bringing
truth.
It home.
Yeah, the orientation is truth, and the posture is humility and willingness. But humility and willingness, I think, are very similar here. Right?
Yeah, and humility is a great word too, because humility doesn't mean wrong, doesn't mean you're wrong. right? Like to be humble doesn't actually have to mean that you were wrong and you have to admit you're wrong, but it has to do with your posture.
Your posture.
Right?
It's not
to be
giving
willing
up.
to hear.
Yeah, it's not putting yourself down. It's none of that.
Yeah, exactly. I love, by the way, I want to emphasize it because you've mentioned that word many, many times. I don't know if I've ever told you how much I appreciate it, enjoy it. Posture. There's something, it's a nuanced word in a way to me, for me anyways. When I hear you say that, I love it. It's great. It has to do with the way that you're approaching something, you know, the perspective almost, or all of that is kind of wrapped in that. And I think it's really useful.
What posture are you adopting as you walk into the conversation? I mean, we're talking about this is the wrong conversation. Well, a lot of times the wrong conversation is wrong because of the posture you adopt when you start it.
Yeah.
Are you going in to defeat your partner?
Right. Recipe for disaster.
First of all, good luck. You probably chose somebody based on the fact that you can't too easily defeat them. That's probably one of the reasons why you like them. And then also, if you can do it, do you want what's left over? Like I said before. So that's why those conversations are wrong. But if you adopt the right posture, and it's easy. It's the things that everyone says. It's humility. It's gratitude.
Right.
It's serving the thing that's above you, whatever that is. Serve the relationship, serve the right God, serve the, like you're talking about, serve relating itself. That's what you're armed with when you go in, because like we said, in marriage, there's plenty of time for the worst of you to emerge and the worst of your partner to emerge. And there's plenty of circumstances that are going to push you to your limits and push them to their limits, and you are going to meet the darkest side of you and the darkest side of your partner. And how you meet them and the posture you adopt when you meet them will decide. What's the Indiana Jones movie? I think it was The Last Crusade with Sean Connery. I don't know why I don't watch a lot of movies, and I always have these movie references.
Go for it, go.
But this is a religious statement. They come up to this big cliff, big ravine that they have to get across. There's no way to get across it, and so they're reading the clues on the map, and it says, "Only a penitent man will pass," or something like that. Yeah. Or there's something. I'm screwing up the movie and I'm screwing up the thing, but only a penitent man will pass, meaning get down on your knees, be humble, and he gets down, and the blades go over his head. And then there's another one where he's sitting on the ravine, and then there's something about faith, and that he has to step out into the air, only to discover that there is something holding him up.
I remember that one.
Okay. Yeah. So mix those two together, and you have my point.
Well, here we are into another thing. Like I have what I call the relating spiral. I created this, I think it's 6-part thing, and commitment's a big part of it, and faith and hope is a big part of it. Right? Like having faith is in your partner, in yourself, in the institution of marriage, if you want to call it that too, right? It almost sounds like commitment again, but it's not. I mean, faith is the act of believing in something that is yet unseen, right? I mean, that faith is that we're going to make it to 40 years or whatever, we're going to be married for 60 years. And so the point about faith that's really important, in my opinion, is twofold, right? One, that it's incredibly important. Like you have to have that, because if you don't really, and I've seen this, you tell me, I've worked with people that's what we have to work on. Like a lot of times when people come to us for relationship issues, right, David, it's usually pretty dire. Like people don't do it until it's like somebody said divorce, right?
Yeah, they're at the end.
They're at the end. And so they come to you and they're like looking for help, and one of the things often one of the things that I feel like they need to work on is that level of faith, right? They've become habitualized in their history with this person. So they see this person and they say, they're never going to change. Nothing's ever going to change about this. Or I'm not changing even, right? Yeah, in order to start working past that, you have to have some faith that you can. And here's the tricky thing about faith. You think that once you have faith, you're not going to have doubt. No, you're still going to have doubt. This is the vulnerability part of it too, right? If you don't have doubt, you don't have faith. I mean, you have something else. You have certainty, as they say, right? Like so faith isn't about not feeling that uncertainty a bit. It's just putting some hope or some faith into the fact that we can. into the fact that you can do it, that they can do it, right? It's an important element to that. And that is, does this make any sense, what I'm trying to share?
It does. Not blind faith. You don't just want to
No.
You don't want to give up your responsibility. You don't want to just trust that it'll be okay and shut your eyes and sweep stuff under the rug.
No, that's definitely not what I'm talking about.
Right? But you want to have faith that if you genuinely give it your all, not that it's going to make the marriage work, and this is really important, I think, that not that you're going to save the marriage,
important,
but that you are going to grow and that things are going to move forward and not backward. That it's going to be good.
Yeah, this comes back to that thing beyond yourself thing, right? Like in other words, for the marriage or for personal growth. And I hate that term, personal growth, but I mean, sure. I think we all know what it means, right? But only because it's overused, I feel like, right? But right, to move forward, to expand yourself, for them to expand themselves, for life to move forward. That is a higher purpose, and that will always be served. And to have faith in the fact that will happen. And that is so important. I often tell people that too. Like, look, especially if I'm meeting with both people, right? I'm not here to save your marriage. I'm going to tell you right now. Like, that's not my job. First of all, I couldn't if I wanted to. Second of all, I don't even know if we should, right? I'm not even sure it's what should be happening. But I do know that if we can work our way through this, you'll look back on this and be grateful that it happened, whether it was that it stayed together or that you split up. But you'll look back and you'll say, something was gained.
Something was gained.
And that's what I'm working towards.
Something deeper. Yeah, there's something.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So you just said something. This is a tangent, but I've always but this is a key difference between my wife and I.
Okay.
I believe you and I are similar. I don't know about your wife, but anyway, let me lay it out.
All right.
I come from split parents, so I spent my whole life thinking that marriage is a thing that can end and will end. And my parents are still great friends. They were always good friends. So it wasn't even an ugly split. It's like, people who like each other and get along can even split. So right. So I was born into the world that marriages break up. You know, that relationships are inherently fragile things. My wife. And my parents the relationship was always pretty nice, you know, even though it split. My wife's family, there's a lot more dynamic to it. There's a lot more back and forth, but they're still together. And so she sees it as no matter what happens, the bond is the bond.
Yeah.
Right? And this is just an interesting subject for me because to me, the fact that I see it as fragile and that it's allowed to fall apart in any moment wakes me up to the fact that I need to stay engaged in defending it and building it and looking at myself and challenging my wife. Like, I'll see a problem. I say, if this problem doesn't get solved, it will end because I will end it, right?
Yeah.
I know that I will walk, or I know that I'll self-destruct it in some way if I don't solve this. So this has to be solved. So to me, accepting the fact that it can dissolve keeps me in it. But to my wife, knowing that it can't dissolve is what keeps her in it.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah.
And I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, because I feel like you've said to me like that you could you're fully aware that the whole thing could, after 25 years, it could dissolve tomorrow.
Absolutely. You know, this comes down to a deep spiritual thing that I share many times, and I have videos about it. And, you know, I live on the principle of uncertainty. Like, that's where I try to live there. In other words, I use silly examples, like I'm driving home from a hard day's work and I'm thinking about the cookies that my wife made and, you know, the night before or something is silly, or my daughter made or whatever. And I'm like, I can't wait to get one of those cookies when I get home. Wait a minute, mister. They could all be gone when you get, you know, stupid, silly little thing, right? But I work on even at that level. Like, I will try not to assume that I'm going to show up at home and have some cookies available, right? I do the same thing when it comes to my marriage, for sure. In what I perceive as a healthy way, you know. I don't know if I've ever really discussed this with my wife exactly. I think she might lean a little more towards your wife's prerogative, funny enough. You know, like, that's where she gets her strength, by thinking, oh, no, this can't go anywhere, so therefore I have to.
So we better fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. For me, it's like I think I'm more like again. It's just an orientation I have to life, and that's only because I think anybody who's living aware enough has to see that that's just the way that life is. It's filled with uncertainty. So better, I live in that realm of faith, or I try to, right? Like I'm fairly comfortable there, And so I do that with my wife for sure, just to bring it back to relationships. And I find it extremely precious because of that reason. To me, you know what I mean? Like it's precious because it's fragile, like you're saying, or something like that. And I don't really see it as fragile, funny enough. I think our relationship after it's definitely been 25 years that we had a relationship. It's pretty stable, but I get careful. I try to be careful about,
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to just assume everything's always going to be great, but yeah, it shows up in ways like even in the movies we like. Like I'll enjoy watching a Woody Allen movie because you're seeing all the insecurities bubbled up and everyone's neuroses and everything's falling apart. And I like to study like how do things fall apart? What are those movies are famous for a reason. People must relate to these neuroses or these sides
Sure.
So what's it look like? What are the mechanics? And so let me learn to spot them ahead of time. My wife doesn't even want to watch that movie.
Yeah.
She doesn't like watching people just able to be so self-involved to even let themselves go down that path.
Right.
Maybe she's not that self-involved, and to her it's like foreign territory. I think I am that self-involved. Right? so it's okay. So I can defeat my own self-importance. Let me watch what it's going to look like when it happens, so I can have some ammunition against it, or so I at least know my adversary, myself.
Right.
So I know myself as an adversary. Maybe that's a good way of saying it.
Sure.
I just was curious, because I had never asked you about it. Yeah, I live in the uncertainty principle like you. I think I just think I wake up, I say I don't know if tomorrow's coming, so
that's it. After I thought about the cookie, I'll be thinking about what if I die in a car accident right now.
Me too. Yeah.
Right. I mean, not in some morbid way, but just as a check, just as a reality check. It could happen. What's that mean?
Could happen.
Like, are you ready? In a weird way, that's kind of how I feel.
Every time my kids go out the door, did I say goodbye to them in a way where if I don't see them,
yeah,
it doesn't work me up. I don't get all wishy-washy.
Yeah.
I just check myself because sometimes I'm distracted. Yeah, bye. No. Stop. Goodbye. I'll miss you. I'll see you later. Same thing with my wife and things like it just keeps you on check. I think
so. Yeah.
Keeping uncertainty right in front of your face, I think, is a.
I think it's an important thing. I really do. Again, I think one of the things when I talked about it in a video was about COVID. This shocked so many people and it was so hard and all this sort of stuff was because of all the uncertainty that it brought. And it really didn't affect me that way. And part of that is because I just kind of live there. So like, it's not that surprising. I mean, it's surprising, but I don't know. I'm just more comfortable in that place of uncertainty because I've cultivated that. I mean, it's not like something that I've always had. It is something that I actually have consciously worked on cultivating. So,
and he's not lying to you, everyone, because he was here when it happened.
That's right. I was I was freaking 2,000 miles away from my poor family while it was all going down. That was the only sad part.
We were out in the patio loading in supplies. And my wife commented on because we didn't know that things were going to lock down, but there was stress in the air and there was stuff happening in the house, and my wife was like, maybe now's not the right time to have Adrian come. And I'm like, come on, me, the eternal optimist. But when you were there, she says, I thought it would be stressful having you here, but your presence is actually quite reassuring because you just take it all in stride. You're actually quite comfortable in this uncertainty.
Yeah, that was so sweet when she said that. I do remember that too. Only because it touched me, I felt. I was so grateful to be there, even though I was sad to be away from my family. But I mean, you guys were such great hosts for that whole thing that to hear that I could contribute something too like that was, I don't know, it meant a lot to me when she said that.
I want to go on another tangent because we're talking about uncertainty.
Yeah, let's do
Like a lot of people get in a relationship, and then of course the relationship invariably gets very difficult. It sucks, right?
Right.
And so then maybe it sucks too much, and they leave and they go start again. And you would think that that's plunging themselves back into uncertainty, but it's the opposite. They're plunging themselves back into certainty. They're going back into the pattern that they know. I know how to start dating someone. I know how to meet someone. I know how to flirt. I know about all of the first, make out things. I know how to do all this. I know how to put on my best face for a while. I can get someone to fall in love with my potential, until they meet my reality. I can do all that. Until it
takes you to your limit.
Until it takes you to your limit. But that's what a marriage does, is it takes you to your limit. And then once you reach your limit, it's all unknown territory after that.
That's it. Right.
If you want to really investigate uncertainty and variety, and because everyone says, oh, marriage, you don't have any more variety. No, that kind of variety, the variety you get by being a single guy and maybe meeting a bunch of women, it's not variety after a while. It's just not.
Yeah. No, of course.
I just remember being single and maybe I'd meet someone. I'm like, oh, this is really nice. But as things played out, I would have a feeling of deja vu. It's like, I've been here before.
Oh, yeah.
And not once. Like, I've been here a couple times. And
right.
Like, and you almost, like, you kind of get like, in marriage, I've never been here a couple times. I'm always in new territory. You guys have been together for almost 25. We've been married for just over 10. Every year is a new year.
Yeah. And some of it will feel very familiar. I mean, redundant, if you will. But because it's, again, you know why? It's because it's depth, not breadth, right? I mean,
yes.
Like, that's what's happening that over and over when you stay in the same place, though. Like, I always talk about the drill, or maybe we do together. I can't remember if you've said it before, too, but it's like a drill bit, right? Like, you're drilling into something. But if you're moving the drill bit all over, you're not going to get deep, right? You got to keep that drill bit in the same place and find your way down.
Keep pushing. Yeah, keep pushing.
Gently.
Gently.
Right.
But
Gently.
if you keep it in the same place, that's how you get deep. That's a really good... I've never heard you say that, but that's a beautifully eloquent metaphor, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's anyway, I just think that if you want true variety, if you want a real adventure, commit to one person.
Yeah.
There's an adventure.
I agree. You don't have to. It's just that, and again, that's what's interesting too, right? I mean, this conversation is definitely the wrong conversation for some people. They're not interested at that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interested in the depth, right? So you know what I mean. Thus, the sincere seeker, the humble and hopeful. You know what I mean? Like this. But if you want that, if you're looking for depth, if you want to experience life at a deeper level, yourself at a deeper level, what it means to relate on all levels, nothing better than a marriage or a committed partnership, however you want to place that, right? I mean.
That's pretty much what you said at the wedding. That's what you said at the wedding.
Embrace the suck. Embrace the suck. Exactly. No, I couldn't agree. And again, here's the funny thing, right? Like, here it's been 25 years. In so many ways, my wife and I's marriage is better than it's ever been. I can honestly say that. My daughter often says, I don't know how you and Mom ever got married. You're so different, right? And then I don't know how you've managed to stay married. She'll say that to me, laughing most of the time. But and I'll tell her, like, not to sound arrogant here or anything, honey, but not only are we still married, we're still happily married. We're still healthily married. That's a real achievement.
What a difference that is.
It's a big difference. And by the way, just to make sure it's clear, David, there have been at least 2 times in our marriage that it almost wasn't, like that divorce was seriously on that sort of, horizon, if you will, or you could almost see it, So we've been
gets
close.
There. Everyone
I think
gets
so.
There. I think you have to get there.
I know. It's like the conversation last time, right? Like, you have to have that polarity. You have to have that friction.
Everything's going to grow until you get right to the edge of like, okay, we're really there. And maybe you need to see where that edge is. Maybe you need to see where the edge is to push you into growth.
Of course. Well, that's the thing. Because it sucks, we don't go running there. Right? Because it's not super pleasant. We're not like seeking it out and like so we kind of have to be pushed there. You know?
Yeah.
You would kind of have to be pushed there. And thankfully it works that way. Again, that comes back down to the opposites thing. Like the differences don't go away. My wife is still different from me. Now I have implemented some of her, some of her-ness, if you will, and she has done the same for sure. But those differences are not going to go away, nor should they, if we embrace this whole thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, that was one of the things that when I asked my wife about what sucks about marriage, she's like, well, and she kind of says what we're saying. I mean, she wrapped it up much more succinctly. She goes, well, everything that kind of sucks is really good about it. Like she goes, it was really hard for me to learn my own limitations and the limitations of my perspective. She goes, and to see things through your eyes, or to understand that there's things that I have blind spots.
Yeah.
She'll say I was prideful and it took me a long time, but because of what we've been through and repetition of reaching that wall.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
It takes beating it over and over and over again, and that's one of the things I said to her about. Here's one practical, just to bring it right back down to the ground level, about one thing that happens in marriage, is that, like I said, prison on purpose. You're in it with somebody for a long time, and so your life is built out of everything that repeats. And when good things repeat, what happens? We take it for granted.
Yeah.
Right? When the same problem repeats, what happens? It's like poking an open wound, right?
Yeah.
There can be, 99% of your body can be in great shape, but if there's a hole in 1% of it,
right,
and someone's poking a salty stick into that hole, you're screaming. You're screaming.
Right.
And so the problems you have usually fall into the same territory. Those problems never fully get addressed because your differences persist, and it's constant effort. But the problems just become more and more sore because they keep getting poked, and all the stuff that's going well you forget because you can just take it for granted because it's so easy. It goes invisible. It disappears because it's so automatic.
So is there ever a time that the poking with the salt stick ends?
I don't know that it ends, and I don't know that it would or should ever end. However, what makes it okay is that there's always progress.
Yeah.
So I think that's a metaphor for life in general, right? I don't believe in the ends. I just believe in the means. Right? And so I think that it's the same in marriage. Does anyone ever bridge all of their differences into perfect harmony? I mean, into perfect harmony, maybe, but unison? No.
Right? No. Right.
There's a difference between harmony and unison, right? So, we are not the same. So there's always a difference, but we've learned how to harmonize our differences much better. And yes, it's a challenge, and yes, we're imperfect at it, and yes, it's. Anything that's been with us as a challenge has been with us since the beginning, and everything that was easy with us has been easy with us since the beginning. And so I don't know that it ends. It ends enough.
I think the sensation, the reason I'm calling you out a little bit, because it was gruesome, first of all. But it's fine. I mean, there is a reality to that. But I think eventually the salt falls off the stick. The stick becomes a cotton swab or something, right? Meaning that the sensation of it, if that makes any sense, right, shifts a bit and becomes more tolerable, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I like that word, but and you can even appreciate it to some degree. Like, I remember the things that were so different about my wife and I that were so painful for so many years too. There's some of these things that were really, really painful for a long time. That's how you get to the place where you're thinking about divorce, right? I mean, it doesn't happen like this usually. So some of those things, they still occur now, right? But they're not as painful. They're not. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I know, and I'm not trying to, but I'm just saying, so it's important. I don't want to get too discouraging here for people either, right? It's not as painful. It still hurts to some degree, but I'm very familiar with that pain, if you will, too. I know the value of it, because usually it's a trigger to remind me right, of something. So I go, ooh, God, I'm getting a little too caught up in myself or my own needs or wants or, these sorts of things, right? So I can, and it doesn't sting quite as much as it used to, thank God, right? I don't think anybody can sustain that kind of level of, like, when it reaches, you know what I mean? Like, too much pain is too much, obviously.
But the thing is, the fact that there's progress, it just relieves so much of the pain, because you don't need... Life is progress. There's no end to any goal you have. You don't arrive. Where do you arrive?
Well, we know where I always say this. You know where the end is. It's death. So what are you rushing towards, right? Yeah. What's the hurry? You know how it ends. So,
Yeah, and until it ends, there's no shortage of territory to explore. Right? There's no end, like you said, there's no end to the depth. I think last time we talked, you said there's no end to beauty, there's no end to the depth, there's no end to the pain, there's no end to any of it until the end. But
I disagree. See, that's the thing. There is an end to pain. That's what's kind of interesting. I don't mean to contradict, but there is an end to pain. Where there isn't an end to truth. Death. Whether it's death of the relationship, death of the body, whatever, right? But that's the cool thing when it comes to beauty and truth and these sorts of, you know what I mean? Transcendent qualities. There's no end to them, which is really beautiful. Like I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but that's a common spiritual thing. Like there is no end to those things. Where there is an end to suffering and there is an end to,
Yeah, I mean, just practically. The fact that progress on any issue is happening makes it okay,
right?
And then it's good that it's good that progress is out over time, because then you have time to think, well, is this her job to fix, or is this my job to fix, or is it neither? Or does anything need to be fixed?
Right.
Like the fact that these challenges occur over a longer arc. It brings the depth, because you have time to ask those questions. You have time to explore, okay, she's given some progress to this issue. My turn. What can I do? Or how do I meet her halfway on this?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a big ask. Okay, can I do it? Let's see.
Right.
Let's see. What do I have to do? What do I have to let go of to do that?
Right.
What do I have to do? And So I guess I don't. The suffering goes away. It's not that the issue doesn't have any issue, like, because there's if you're married, there's going to be a collection of these things, right? So because you're different people, right? You're not, like I said, you're in harmony. You're not in unison, and so anytime one of these issues come up, I think that the marriage dies if progress dies. But if there's progress, then your marriage is alive. And if there's progress, your marriage is happy. Because that fuels hope. It fuels faith.
Right.
It's a lot easier to have faith if you see things moving forward.
Yeah, that's true. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? Because they're not seeing that. But again, back to your time. Have you given it enough time? Now, you can't just sit around and wait, like you said, too. It's, faith doesn't mean just sit on your laurels, obviously, right? I mean,
no.
But it's just having that. The thing that I shared was faith/hope, right? Faith is the act of believing. Hope is the act, is actually doing something towards this thing that's yet to be seen. That's how I feel about it. Those are my little definitions for the difference between faith and hope, right? Faith is just it goes from the head to the heart, where you're feeling it, and then hope is the actual taking some sort of action. That step into vulnerability is what it would be, right?
I reverse those two. I always think of hope as I hope it works, and faith is an action. I always think of faith as an action.
It's just, it could be a choice. I mean, that's just a term.
Mine's
right?
more
a
correct
definition.
than yours. Mine's more correct.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm sure that's true. That's because my posture is much more humble than yours, so therefore I can accept the fact.
But my orientation is superior. I'm serving the better God.
Well, my dad could beat your dad up. I'm going to tell you right now. So, Anyways.
All right, we could continue this whole train and go up for another hour giving each other shit.
No. So it's getting late here.
I think that's a beautiful place to wrap it up. So on our next episode, now that we've said one 1/100th of what needs to be said about marriage.
Right.
Our next conversation for the wrong conversation is going to be, your empathy is a problem.
That's a good one. Could have fallen right into this conversation, funny enough, too, about marriage. Yeah. And so let us know, too. Let us know if this conversation is doing that for you. Like, are you finding it to be the right conversation, the wrong conversation? What's your experience with relationships? Do they suck, right? How do they suck? I mean, again, I think it's very useful for other people to read comments and be inspired by them.
Please add your voice and add some energy to it, because in the way things work these days, if you're not adding energy into it, no one else gets an opportunity.
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, no one even gets an opportunity to see that it's there. So please help us out and give us some energy. We could use it.
Awesome. That was a great way to put it. I love that. Well, David, it's been fun as usual.
We'll see you next week.
All right, man.
Go enjoy your marriage.